Saturday Scrum on Triple M, Woodsy, Reedy, Girds and Maroon. Thanks to King G, a king in the industry that continues to innovate. Strong, smart, iconic workwear, pushing the limits in technology and design so that you're set even in the most extreme conditions. Well, those of you who saw 60 Minutes last Sunday night would have seen an interesting story about the great Wally Lewis and his CTE diagnosis. If you missed it, here's just a wrap of what Wally actually said.
You realised you had a problem. What's the diagnosis?
There's the big one. I can't even remember the name of what it's called.
Probable CTE.
Probable CTE. And
that's Wally's partner Linda helping him out, confirming he's been diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE.
One of my first meetings with the doctor, when she asked me just to repeat simple things, and I think she gave me 5 things, and it might have been something like bus, dog, truck, camera, chair. And she said, remember those, and went over them 2 or 3 times, and then said to me, how are you feeling? Everything okay? You don't feel nervous? No. A minute later, she said, what are the things I asked you to remember? And I got 2 of them. And then sometime later after that, she said, do you remember what they were? And I think I said bus. And she looked up. Yeah. Pride's a wonderful thing, but there wasn't a lot of it around then.
But you were renowned for being tough as nails on the footy field, and I think it actually takes a fair bit of strength to acknowledge your frailties.
For a lot of the sports guys, I think most of us take on this belief that we've got to prove how tough we are, how rugged, and if we put our hands up and seek sympathy, then we're going to be seen as the real cowards of the game. But we've got to take it on and admit that the problems are there.
Yeah, well, he's a national treasure, isn't he? The great Wally Lewis, the reason for Origin's success and founding member of the Broncos, the King. I mean, if your nickname's the King, you're doing something right. So let me start with you, Woodsy, because you've spent your career in the middle of the field,
Yep.
getting knocked around. Are you worried about the future and this sort of thing with you?
Oh, look, with all the stuff that's coming out now, you'd be lying to say if you didn't. You didn't. I know when I first came through the grades, I was young. Your responsibilities weren't as high. The priority for myself, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. You ask me that question now. Yeah, I am. I've got 2 kids. I've got another one on the way. I've got a wife. It's not just about me. It's about what I can provide for my family. So and I don't want them to be relying heavily on me after if you do get that CTE and you start becoming forgetful, because it puts more strain on your family. So it's something that you do think about now. I know a lot of young blokes that will come through, they won't think about it at all. They'll just think, oh, what's this bloke talking about? But when you do become a lot older, you have a lot more responsibilities, and you see, I see some of the effects that blokes I've played with or against, now that they've retired and how they've handled their situations. It's a lot different, and it's sort of, it brings you close to home, because it's like, wow, I remember when he was playing, he was flying, and then you see how they've been through hard times and what's made them go through those hard times. It's like, so it does come across the back of your mind a fair bit. So, and then seeing, all I ever knew was he was the king, it was the great Wally Lewis growing up, who's invincible. And then you just see him get through what he's going through now, and he couldn't even remember that a couple of sentences what they asked him prior to that conversation. So it is a little bit scary now.
Girds, what about you? Obviously, you played a wonderful NRL career as well. And being a smaller frame man, you probably got knocked around a little bit more. Have you got any concerns around this?
Yeah, I mean, the games just was so different back then, Maroon. It was seen sort of as a badge of honour. You would get sort of knocked out or you would get your bell rung, and you would be sort of encouraged to get back into the line. And then, the protocols that the game has in place now are wonderful, with HIA. Not only that, with the protocols that then go on after the incident. So the guys, they're monitored for a couple of days, the alcohol's taken out of their diet, things like that. So they're not trained, they're not put into collision until whatever it may be. There's the 11-day stand-down period. So I think all those protocols are fantastic, because we didn't have those. Like, we would get knocked out, then we would go out and have half a dozen schooners, that night, and then we would go straight back into physical contact the next day, and then we would play the next week. And that's just the way that it was back then. So we hear about Wally, and there's some other guys, obviously Paul Green, and how tragic the Greenie incident was a couple of years ago. And they're the more higher profile guys that had fantastic careers and were fortunate enough to post-career come out and stay in the game. But there's a lot of guys out there that, didn't have those sort of careers, that are just facing these battles on a daily basis that no one knows about, and they don't know why. And it can affect like memory loss, depression, early onset of dementia, erratic behaviour, all those things that these guys and their families are dealing with are real. And yeah, I'm always taking. I think prevention's better than the cure. So for me, I don't sort of drink alcohol. I do certain things in my life now to make sure that I give myself every possibility to get through to that next stage of my life, because I'm 50 now, in good condition. And I think that's really important as well for guys to take that on themselves. They're the ones that obviously. As Woodsy said, the responsibility falls on you in relation to, you got families and you got, bills to pay. So I take that pretty seriously. So I make sure that I give myself every opportunity to be there for my family. And I do that by making better choices with life moving forward.
And the game's changed so much, Gers. Like you said, when I first come to the grade, first thing you'd think of, it was getting on the beers straight after the game. How long can we drink for? What's our turnaround like? Whereas now, I can't remember the last time I've had a beer, because you're so worried about, your preparation. And like you said, if you do get that little bit of a head knock, the last thing they want you to do is to have a bit of alcohol. The protocols they got in place, all pre-season, we do little things in the gyms that can help with concussion, like whether it's band work with your neck, all these little things. And at Manly, they've got this. I think we're one of the only clubs to have it. It's one of the first trying. It's like a concussion. If you get a knock in the game, our doctor, Paul Bloomfield, he was one of the head NRL doctors.
Yeah, he used
and
to be the CMO,
the chief executive.
Medical officer, yeah.
And then so he's brought this thing, and you strap it to your head. Apparently it's really good for anyone that's got concussion symptoms. So they've come a long way in what they want to do to prevent things from happening. Obviously, it's a contact sport. We know what we sign up for, but if there's measures that we can put in place to restrict these things from happening, and that's what the NRL have been doing and what they're good at.
Yeah, I don't think the NRL can do much more than what they've done. I think, obviously research into this is constantly evolving, and there's a world meeting they have. I think it's every now and then where they update the protocols and that sort of thing. And the NRL is obviously aware of that. They go to it. The guy said the game's evolved significantly in the last 2 or 3 years. They've taken massive strides in terms of handling that. So, but in terms of, Wally was my hero growing up. He was my favourite player. Well, he still is my favourite player, the King, even though he doesn't play anymore, obviously. But I worshipped the King growing up as a young kid in Queensland. I mean, he was God to us, right? So, he's had some challenges as well while in his life. Obviously, the epilepsy diagnosis, and he had some surgery for that. But to see what he's going through now, it's really difficult, I think, for because you thought of him, as you guys said, he was indestructible, the Kings. Yeah. But it was a different time, and the game's. Crucially, the game's evolved from then. It's continuing to evolve.
Okay, look, we've obviously all, as rugby league supporters, had a lot of concern around blokes like Kalen.
Yeah.
Kalen Ponga, I think he might have had half a dozen in the last 18 months.
Wade Graham, I played with Wade Graham.
Yep.
Luke Keary, they always say they're one. And I've played with Boyd Cordner as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Boyd Cordner is such a great player and a great bloke. He had his career cut short. Yep. But on that subject, this is what Kalen had to say. Kalen Ponga.
Obviously, with my head knocks and the way I started the season, it was a bit of a rough trot for me those first 2-3 months. So when I first came back, to be honest, I was a bit nervous. I wasn't hesitant, but I was nervous just because, at one point I was looking at retirement for a bit there at 25. So to now, just to be through that, to be past that, and just be playing footy and just enjoying what I do. Yeah, it's footy rollercoaster that we play.
Yeah, I mean, it's no question that he's in great form, playing fullback, and the Knights are going so well. What a tragedy, Gerds, that would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, though, Woodsy talks about the old days and the protocols that they have, or they didn't have compared to today. But I would also say, Woodsy, that, back in the day, there wasn't, the collisions probably weren't as big as you didn't have big guys with footwork late at the line. There was more one-on-one tackling. There was more technique around defence, whereas now there's more catching, there's more sort of head up. And so I would say that even though, the protocols are better now, and we also didn't do a lot of defensive work or contact work midweek, whereas you guys now do a hell of a lot of that stuff. And I would imagine that there's times through the week where guys get bumps where they actually need to recover from as well. And that wasn't sort of part of those days in the 80s and 90s, but obviously we all know how brutal the game was with, headshots and high tackles and how they were looked at back then as well. So it's interesting that, how the game's evolved. But also I feel like these days you're probably more chance of getting, a head knock than you probably would have been back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. Gerds, we've got, there's no lie, there's been a lot of wrestle sessions now at clubs, the contact. That's one thing that I think the players are trying to get in with the CBA. It's about the collisions. You look at rugby union. I was talking to Siebes about it because he spent a lot of time with the assistant coach for England. They've got a certain amount of minutes each week or at a session that they're allowed to do as in contact work. And that's something that they've brought into the game. And
that'll come into our game.
He's on an advisory board at the moment where they're going through all this data about everything that's happening in the game, how much, what's a rating for a certain contact. Is it an 80% for this session or is it a 60%? So they're trying to get, put a nail on the head of everything, but you're not always going to get it, but they're doing their best they possibly can for us players.
Well, you've got concussion spotters at training. Have you got designated concussion spotters?
We played against Roosters a couple of weeks ago, and Billy Smith and the winger, Joseph Swiley, they missed the game because they had a head clash at training.
Yeah, right.
And you'd think a lot of clubs would say, oh, no, we'll just keep that in the light so they can play on the weekend. No, they've got people at training that are there to watch the concussions there.
So we all agree then, or do you three all agree, Gerds, I'll start with you again. The NRL is doing enough, trying to do everything they can.
Oh yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say that they're at a point now where they can. I'd say it's just a continual process that we can always just learn from and get better at. But if you look at the AFL and the incident that happened last weekend there, I think Port Adelaide were fined $100,000 for breaching, the AFL concussion protocol. So they're another sport that take it very seriously. It just needs to be taken
that was
seriously.
Shocking. Did you see that? How could they miss that? It was unbelievable.
It was crazy. And that's the thing, like, we've got doctors now, and if you got to, with the protocols, you got to remember a certain amount of words, like Wally said. If you don't remember, so you got a baseline you do at the start of the year, and if you're not close to that, they just won't let you on. Doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Cherry Evans or whether you're myself. You're top tier or low bottom tier. If you don't pass those criteria, you're not playing.
And do you feel like, Woodsy, that the coaching staff are now taking that seriously? Because obviously in the past there's been an opportunity there to maybe, make changes with, your interchange, or if it's a forward that goes down early, or they feel like there might be, a possible chance to take advantage of that situation, they would. Do you feel like that's sort of moving away?
Yeah, definitely, because you've got that the doctor at the game that's not part of any club. So if you have a symptom of category 1 where you just stay, if you lay down and there's no movement, then you're completely rubbed out of the game. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, like, you could probably have a minor head knock and just try to stay out of it and think you can get a free HIA. They'll just rule you out. It takes you out of the club's hands. And we're told that as, if you get a knock but you're okay, you need to get up straight away. You can't just pretend to milk for a penalty, otherwise you're going to get pulled off.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. All right, now Woodsy.
Sorry, boys.
Now you made the point before that you now that because you got a couple of kids and you got a wife and you got the life of a man that's 31, 32 years old. So it's only natural that you are concerned with your own mortality. So I'm going to ask you now, it's not you're not feeling any effects of this. You're not feeling headaches or anything like that.
No. I'm pretty lucky at the moment. I've only had probably 2 head knocks in my career, like ones that you remember. That I remember one day I caught one and I couldn't drive home. It was just it was a little bit blurry vision. The club were really good all week. You go on this like minor duties. Each day you got to progress, and if you can improve, you got a baseline of things you do at training. They're really good with that. But the other thing as well, being a parent, like with my son now, like if he's going to play rugby league, it's sort of, I worry a little bit now if he gets head knocks at a young age, and it's like, something I never thought about before. When you listen to other people go, it's a rough sport, blah, 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 you sort of go, come on, mate, it's rugby league, it's something, grow up. But when you have kids, it puts perspective on it. Yeah. It's something completely different. It's something I never thought.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, I might sound like a bit of a softie here, but it's your kids. Like, it's something that
you're just
really,
being a parent,
you
mate.
really
Yeah.
care about, and it's things that previously I would never have thought about.
Yeah.
You know, we've all got kids here. Like, you don't want your son to go out there, and, you know, it's even the same thing. Like, you talk about that weight division for your age.
Yep.
You know, if your son's gone up against a kid that's 30 kilos bigger and stronger, you worry about the damage that kid could do. Not that they want to go out and hurt the kid, but that forceful of the extra weight can really hurt someone.